Okay, this is a video about the orientation and mobility inventory version 6. This video is going to replace several others that I've done over the years as the inventory has kind of gone through versions. There are two primary videos, one about the orientation mobility inventory, how to use it, and then one on how to get it to do the paperwork for you. That was all kind of superseded when I figured out how to make this thing write reports and do all the paperwork for you. So, just going to try to consolidate it down to this and hopefully make it a little bit tighter of a video all the way around. For those who are familiar with the inventory, the primary changes are the street crossing domain. It looks very different than it has in the past. And if I'm really clever, I'll put something down in the description below as far as exactly when we get to the street crossings domain, so that way you can just zip right to it. For those who are new to the inventory, welcome. The who, what, when, where, why of the orientation mobility inventory, I created it over a decade ago. Then just here in my house, so there's the who, when, and where. The what, the O&M inventory is a computer-based compendium of skills that comprise O&M. It's a tool that allows you to measure student progress, plan lessons, dispatch paperwork, and it's one of the things I've always worked on for it is to try to make it quick and easy to use. Some people are intimidated because it's Excel and it looks kind of big and daunting. But I promise once you get into it and you start using it, it actually flows very easily, especially going from one assessment period to another. So the why. When I set out to create the inventory, I had been using TAPS like a lot of people. It was kind of the industry standard for many, many years. But TAPS has some issues that I was wanting to address with this. The inventory has both breadth and depth while also being quick to use. The inventory isn't pass fail. The scale is it's not a plus or a minus. Instead, you'll find on every page a rating scale, which is 0, a student not capable of demonstrating a skill or doesn't need it. There's a whole vision specific domain, a student with no vision, those are all going to be 0s. They do not count against them. That doesn't count against the score. Likewise, a student who has a very stable visual condition and maybe they've got pretty good fields, 2100, 2200, something like that. They're not going to need all of the cane skills in the cane skills domain. A 3-point touch, for example, they're just going to look over and see the sidewalk. So you'd rate those as 0s on those kids. And that would not count against the kid. One is a student doesn't demonstrate a skill, but may or will learn the skill. And so this is kind of the kid has the potential to do it. And that 2 is the student demonstrates the skill only when you are directly prompting. And so that is, just you're barely introducing the skill to the kid. 3, a student demonstrates the skill without verbal or physical prompting at least some of the time. So they're starting to try to, to own that skill. 4, the student demonstrates the skill without verbal or physical prompting most of the time. So most often they're doing it. Every now and then they may need a reminder. And then a 5, the student has mastered the skill. They do it without physical or verbal prompting. They own that skill. In terms of number wise, the way it works in the formula is 1 is basically a 20, a 2 is a 40, a 3 is a 60, a 4 is an 80, and a 5 is 100. The 0, of course, doesn't count against them, so it doesn't really matter. So you don't have pass fail. Instead, you have a rating system that kind of goes. It progresses as the student progresses. So it's not just, yes, the student has this. You put a tally mark and boom, kid's got it. So you're not, you have more nuance. You're able to show that the student is still learning it or still has a way to go. And the student, when they look at their own inventory, can see where they're rating and they can self-rate. I often have my kids self-rate. The inventory shows regression. Right now, for example, we have it up on the screen with 3-point touch. And, maybe in this next quarter, I'm rating these skills. And the easiest way to rate the skills, or when you're doing an update, is just copy your column and then paste it, and then go through and start looking at it. You know, does the student consistently demonstrate handshake grip with their hand near their hip? Yes, they still do that. Pencil grip, you know, you work with a kid on pencil grip again, and they look at you like you're a space alien, and they can't remember it. And, you know, you hit it a couple of times in that assessment period, and the kid's just not getting it. Well, maybe that goes down to a 2 from a 3, you know, because now they're not sometimes doing the skill without physical or verbal prompting. They're always needing physical or verbal prompting. And so the skills can regress. And if enough of the skills regress, and in fact, let's pop back here to the front page, the numbers that I was just inputting, they all transfer here to this front page. So this gives you something that a parent, and when you hit print, by the way, unless you hit print workbook, which you don't want to do, it just naturally comes up as print, and it prints this one page. You can give this to a parent, and they can see where the kid has made progress or not. And we can see with cane skill 70.9, and just by lowering that one skill, it's 70.3. So in terms of regression, the inventory allows you to show it. The inventory allows you to show progress across the continuum of skills instead of with discrete skills. And what I mean by that is, you know, we were just talking about a particular cane skill. If your goal is, you know, little Billy is going to, you know, use a constant contact technique 80% of the time, or 7 out of 10 trials, or whatever the thing is. You know, you'd have to write it a little more specifically than just use constant contact technique, you know, and kind of write out what it is and all that. All that goal does is talk about Billy's cane skill with constant contact. It doesn't talk about indoor O&M. It doesn't talk about self-protection. It doesn't talk about orientation. It doesn't talk about all the other things you're teaching little Billy, you know. And so this shows all the progress with all of the stuff you're doing. And so that's something that parents have genuinely appreciated, because then they can have better discussions. You know, well, wait a minute, I see my kids at 60%, but their street crossing is only 46%. What's going on with that? And by the way, let me state now that when I talk to parents, these are the skills that are expected of an independent adult. So your little Billy, who's maybe say in 7th grade, has approximately 61% of all the skills expected of an adult. Parents can wrap their head around that very easily. They're not expecting their 6th or 7th grade student to be an independent traveler at that point. Now, if little Billy is an 11th grader and we're at 60% and little Billy is a very capable student, well, the parent can really have a conversation with, wait a minute, why is my kid's ability to travel so low? What needs to happen? What hasn't happened? You know, and all that kind of stuff. All those conversations can happen. So this shows parents in a way that is easy to grasp, and that they can then have conversations with you about it. So so we've got that. Goals drawn from the inventory. We just talked about that. Tend to be very quantifiable. They tend to be based on the entirety of the inventory, and we'll get to that towards the very end, and I'll show you the paperwork piece that this does for you down here in these little R1 tabs, R1, R2, R3. The inventory allows data to be drawn from skill areas, domains, or all of the skills. So you can have a conversation with a student or with a parent about street crossings, and a different conversation with them about guided travel or, you know, concepts. And so you can kind of have that breakdown. So when a parent asks, well, how's my kid doing? It's not just, well, he's doing great on that discrete O&M goal we had about going up and down stairs. It's that overall picture. You see 12 assessment periods here on the front. And these 12 assessment periods, they alternate blue and yellow. Back here, when you hit the various tabs, we go to the concepts domain, for example, you have the first 6 columns, first data sets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you just rate vertically. And then once all these are full, you come down to the second data set, and this is column 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 over there on that front page. So for example, with concepts, I'll go ahead and I'll stick some stuff down here. We'll say Billy is doing wonderfully on concepts. Okay, so we, and you notice since there's no zeros, or since there's nothing entered, the 5 is the score for the area. And that's, basically saying that little Billy has all these skills. So when we go to the front page, we'll see that the 100% has transferred there from column 12, the bottom half, the bottom 6 columns, and then has transferred over. And we don't have a progress goal because we don't have a goal, or at least not yet, but we will. So get rid of that real quick. Okay, clean that up. Like I said, the inventory is very easy to navigate. So we've got the 12 assessment periods. Now, the 12 assessment periods can be whatever it is you need them to be. I use them quarterly. I update my kids, and this writes my progress reports, does everything. If you're in Texas, that's every 6 weeks. And so, if you're doing this every 6 weeks, you may do it that way. You could choose to do it once a semester, or once a semester. You could do it once a year. If you are working with adults, doing contract services, and all you're going to do is work on public transportation, so go over here to the public transportation domain. Maybe you only get to see the guy 10 times, and you're going to work on just inner city bus travel and nothing else. Well, you can rate inner city bus travel your first time, your second lesson, third, fourth, and go all the way through and show the progress the person made on inner city bus travel. So you can do it time-wise, whatever works for you. The inventory lives online, and that's really important for documentation purposes. I can tell you that the next TAPS book I get from an O&M will be the first. And I don't know that I've ever mailed a TAPS book off to another O&M. So when little Billy leaves my school and goes to your school, I'm not sending you my TAPS or other non-computer based O&M tool, because that's my documentation. Well, with the inventory, it's real simple. Little Billy's going to your school. I can email this to you, or I can email it to Billy's mom and say, hey, when you get to your new school and you find your O&M, just shoot him this email. And that way it's coming from parents, so you don't even have to worry about confidentiality and releases and all that kind of stuff. So this can be transferred very easily back and forth. And the only places where names come into play would be Billy. I'll put Billy Bones from Black Sails. And back here on the reports, you type in Billy, and boom, it auto-populates Billy, and it also keeps going through all the other reports too. So anyway, there's only 2 places the kid's name is. So if you had to strip the name out for some reason, you just erase the little R1 up here in the green, boom, get rid of that, and boom, get rid of this. And then if you've named the file, Billy Bones O&M inventory, you'd have to change it to BB inventory or something like that. I don't know, whatever. So the inventory is not a static tool. It's designed to adapt, and indeed, it's just undergone its 6th major revision. And it's been revised based on what we have seen in the past 10, 15 years in mobility, and it'll continue to be revised. Like the monocular, for example, in vision specific skills is now distance vision devices, because a lot of people will just use a cell phone. And so since society and what they're using has changed, the inventory changes as well. So it's not just trapped in a static form. And then, like I said, it gives you the whole overview versus, going through a tool that it has a bunch of pages to it. And, how is little Billy doing overall? Well, if we look at this page, there's no overview. This gives you the overview. And then, probably its biggest selling point is it's free. The inventory has been, is, and will be free, just free download. And Excel is easy to work with. It will run in numbers. As far as I'm aware, it runs in numbers pretty well. I've only played with it a little bit. Some people like to use it in numbers because they want to put it on their iPad and walk around and put in scores. To me, that's just grim death, because you tap on a box and then, like one of these boxes here for the movement domain, for example. Okay, well, I'm going to rate maintaining balance while walking behind a push device, whatever. Now you got to tap on that, and then you have to choose a number, and then now you have to tap on the next one and choose whatever number. And, you know, you can just sit here and just, you know, just, oh, well, I missed. That little 5 in the gray doesn't do anything, by the way. The inventory won't let you write places you're not supposed to. It'll give you a little message saying, no, you know, no, you're not allowed to write here. No, you don't get to change that text to be something else. If you have suggestions, then things like that, and say, hey, that's not worded very well, or, you know, hey, that's kind of confusing, or that's redundant, or that's dumb. Why'd you put that there, you idiot? You know, send me an email, and then we can kind of see if it's worthy of including in the next version of the inventory. The how of the inventory is, well, I pretty much already showed it. Basically, all you're going to do is just go through and you're just going to rate the skills. Movement has walking, maintaining body alignment, balance, turns. To physically move around the inventory, you have a couple options. I just use my mouse and just click on the bottom, the little tabs down there. Now, maybe you don't want to do that for some reason. Maybe you want to get there with keyboard commands, and that's fine. You can control page down to go through the workbook, and then if you want to go back, just go control page up. That works as well. I also have hyperlinks, so if you want to go to indoor O&M, just click on it. Boom, you're at indoor O&M. Now, be aware that it's going to take you to that page A1. So it's going to take you to the very top box. So if all 6 of these data sets are filled out, and you know you're writing stuff down here in the second data set, it's gonna pop you to A1. So it won't let you just be here on hand trailing, which is C73, the box I'm in right now. Let me go to something that's a little longer. Let me come down here to orientation. So if I'm down here in orientation and I'm at C94, I go back out to the front page, I'm going to click on orientation, and it brought me up to A1. So now I've got to scroll back down. Who wants to do that? So, you know, like I said, I just use the little tabs down here at the bottom, but you can control page up, control page down if you don't want to do it that way. So you just go through and you rate everything that you think needs to be rated. Now, you know, like I was saying with the 0, when the rating scale, and the rating scale's on every page, you know, maybe the kid doesn't have any cane skills, doesn't have need for cane skills. Okay, then those are 0s. I have students who have enough vision to where they don't need 3-point touch, they don't need diagonal trail, but they need the others because they don't have sufficient vision to catch a little low contrast drop off or something like that. And so, you know, being able to just say, okay, well, with a 3-point touch, we're going to say this kid just doesn't need the 3-point touch. Okay, and we can just 0 those out, and then we can 0 out the we can 0 out the well, he'd probably need the 2-point touch, so let's go put those back. There we go. We'll just 0 out. Here we go. And empty or 0, either way, it counts as 0. And remember, 0s do not count against the score. And so it actually went up a bit. The kid was at, there we go. The kid was at about 72%. Well, actually a little more than that. Hang on. There we go. The kid was at about 70%. Now they're at 75% because these were kind of dragging the score down a little bit. The 3-point touch and the diagonal trail were kind of dragging the scores down a little bit. So now it's 75.2. So you come out here and now you see the 75.2. So it just changes the scores for you. So you go through it and it's whatever makes sense to you. You are the expert. You are the orientation mobility specialist making the determination what that person needs or does not need. That's entirely up to you. You know, this is just a tool to kind of help you out with your paperwork and your progress documentation and things like that. You know, you are the expert. So you decide what gets rated, what doesn't get rated. And at any of these, you could look at that in the street crossing domain. Street crossing domain, I changed quite a bit. And the reason why was I had people contact me and say, hey, you know, how you have some of this stuff worded is confusing or conflicting or redundant. You know, I don't teach that particular type of crossing strategy, or I teach this other type of crossing strategy. And so I made a significant change here in the street crossing domain. And instead of having any strategies in here at all, I wonder why I didn't have anything there. Oops. There we go. Sorry, I just entered some stuff into here just to have some things to talk about so we can show some progress and all that kind of stuff. So you come to a plus intersection. So you're identifying it with an all-way stop, with your parallel street stop, your perpendicular street stop, and then with your traffic signal stoplight. Parallel street stop, some people will call that an uncontrolled intersection because the perpendicular traffic just keeps going. And then, you have things like situations of uncertainty and things like that come into play. But, as far as strategies, I came to the realization that what I was doing was kind of redundant anyway. And also, like I said, people were saying, hey, I don't teach it that way. I teach this or whatever. Now it's just, here we are at a plus intersection with an all-way stop, crossing clockwise, crossing counter. And so you're teaching whatever strategies you're teaching that student as far as crossing clockwise, crossing counter at an all-way stop. And you are doing it and writing in your notes, taught him this, taught him that. And so you already have your documentation. And so remember, session notes stand apart from this. I do all my own session notes apart from the inventory. Now you can put notes out here if you are so inclined. You can blah, 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 blah to your heart's content if you want to. I don't bother to do that, but some people do. So anyway, this is the biggest change. And this actually makes the street crossing domain much shorter. It was around, I want to say 250 odd skills. It's now down to 137, which still sounds like a lot, but it goes fast. And one of the things that I really like about how the inventory is structured is I know if I've taught plus intersections with all-way stops, with Y intersection, with a stoplight. There are no Y intersections with a stoplight in my town. And so these are going to stay ones. Everything else here might go to 5s and, 4s or whatever, but these are going to stay 1s until I get the kid to a place where they actually have a Y with a light. And if I never get a kid to an intersection where they have a Y with a light, both I and the student are going to be able to look at this and say, okay, well, that's something they've never done. And so, they can either seek out training later as they need to, or do whatever it is they need to do. But it'll stand out as, hey, I haven't done this, because as I'm updating the inventory and then my next assessment period, which for me is the next quarter, I'm going to see these ones. This kid, I haven't gotten to a Y intersection at all yet. Anyway, so it'll kind of stand in there, with key intersections, with plus intersections, Y, roundabouts, crossing clockwise, crossing counter, and definitely look up, teaching methodology for how do you teach kids to cross at roundabouts, what is the appropriate time, that kind of thing. And then in your session notes, you're really writing down exactly what you taught. And so that way you've got that for your liability piece. So now there are still, I understand, at least a few O&Ms who don't teach counterclockwise crossings. They could zero that out. If they're not going to teach counterclockwise crossings, that's up to them. I mean, personally, I think they should, but they could zero all of those out and say, I'm not going to teach those because, I'm worried about the danger of right turning traffic and so on and so forth. I'm not teaching those. They're zeroed out. It's something where it stands out very clearly they haven't been taught. Or they could just leave them as ones. But either way, it helps me to make sure that I'm teaching clockwise and counterclockwise at all these different intersection types, because remember, our ultimate goal is to get kids to be able to cross at any kind of intersection that they encounter in life. And the more types of intersections and the more ways that they have, more tools in their toolbox, the better they're going to be as far as being able to get across safely and efficiently. So, going down, we have atypical, which is basically your 5 or 6 streets. You have newly developed intersections, and these are things to definitely start looking at. Things like diverging diamonds are going to become more and more common, displaced left turns, because engineers have no more space, but they have to move more vehicles through that space. And so they're coming up with intersections that move traffic more efficiently and more effectively, and minimize traffic conflict points, but they can create genuine pedestrian conflict points. Channelized turn lanes, veering, understanding drivers' perspectives. And it's really strange. The inventory, I believe, is the only tool that has anything about drivers' perspectives. Identify that drivers' visual systems are fallible. Look up the invisible gorilla on YouTube, and you'll understand why people blow through red lights. Especially the like the hawk signals, those pedestrian signals where the lights are usually off, but they turn on when the pedestrian accesses, or when the pedestrian uses the access button. Drivers blow right through those. And it's because of the invisible gorilla. So their visual system is basically throwing away information. And sometimes that information could be a pedestrian, because they're not anticipating a pedestrian. 90% of American pedestrians are killed, not at intersections, but mid-block crossings, because the drivers aren't anticipating to see them there. And I'm guaranteed the first word out of their mouth to the cop is, "I never saw him." And it's not they were playing on their iPhone necessarily. Our visual systems are not as good as we like to think they are. So anyway, so you go through through all the skills, you rate them all. And then, you kind of go through with orientation, cardinality, landmarks, clues, numbering systems, grid, GPS, maps. I had to reword quite a bit of map. I kept in the map key, not because anybody uses gas station maps anymore, but there's an overlay for this for history. A lot of our kids never really get taught how to use a map in a classroom setting. And so if your state requires you to have some kind of standards and benchmark for your goal, just plug in a map thing. Go into the social studies, find something map related, boom, and there's your standard and benchmark. We've got public transportation, atypical, things that are a little bit different. This is where I kind of pigeonholed inclement weather, rural travel. If you're a New York City O&M and the people you work with are in New York City and they are never going to leave New York City, that's great. You can zero these guys out or just leave them as ones. But just be aware that if a student doesn't have the skills to go someplace, you're limiting where the student can go. And so, if, I live in southern New Mexico as I'm recording this, if I never taught subways, my students wouldn't have those skills, and that may make it harder for them to live in those areas. Oh, I don't want to live in New York City because of the subways, and I don't feel confident I'm going to be able to get around. And I want my kids to be able to live wherever they want and do whatever they want in life. I don't want them to be limited because I didn't teach them something. So anyway, though, but that's up to you. I mean, you are the person that is working with the student, and there are lots of other factors, including other time demands and things like that. So you go all the way through and you will get your scores, whatever they are. And we have some here under Kane skills that we can wipe out here in a minute. Anyway, so we have this, we have this set, and so or this data set. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier about a reason to use the inventory is you can actually take all your data sets and see how your kids are progressing, and then you can kind of break that down. And I did a breakdown once where I took all my kids with vision, all my kids without, and I found out my kids without vision were starting lower than my kids with vision, but they were both making the same amount of progress. Now, that still means that my kids without vision were not catching up, but it was enough that I could talk to administration and make them understand this is why I see the kids without vision for twice as much, 3 times as much, or 4 times as much as my kids who have vision, so I could show that we were doing right by the kids. And if anything, the data showed that there was a need for me to do more time with the kids. But, finding that in a student schedule can be somewhat difficult. So that's the overview of how the inventory works. Up here on this front page, by the way, pretty much anywhere you try to type, it's going to say no, 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 no. There are a couple of places you can type. You can type in the kid's name. You can also type in our next assessment period. We're going to say this was done in 3 of 21. Here's 12 of 21. Here's 3 of 21. And I finally got smart. It takes a while sometimes. I finally got smart, and you see those dates pop through. Now, you see up here, it says D1 because that's the formula. But these just say date because up here on the front, it just says date. And so these dates are going all the way back to each of these. And so the 10, 21, 12, 21, 321 popped in on each of the domains. That way you don't have to go through and type it over and over and over, because I was doing that for a while. And I mean, that was just dumb. Just kind of a waste of time. Try to make things as quick and easy as I can. All right, for a goal, let's say this was little Billy's first assessment period. And my goal for him was going to be, he's at 55.8%, rounded up to 56. I'm going to say 61. Not 610, 61. 61%, something like that. But here we are in the next quarter, and he's already made 61%. And well, the third quarter, we're just going to get rid of there because we're not, or that third assessment period. I just put some stuff in Cane Skills. Depending on the goal, I mean, basically for most of my kids, I round up and add 5. And that's what the goal that it's going to suggest here in a minute is going to do. It's going to round up and add 5. So let me change my screen sharing. New share. I want to share just a blank page. Hopefully what you're looking at now is just a blank page. I'm going to go to that tab R2, and on that R2, and I'll get back there in a minute. I'm copying the kids' evaluation. And so now I'm going to go back to my page that I'm hopefully sharing. And if I just hit paste, if I just do Control V for paste, my eval basically shows up. But you don't want to just do it that way, because you want to make this look all nice and pretty. And so, for example, coming here to movement, Billy did well with the skills that made up the areas of walking, maintaining body alignment, walking, balance, had room for the improvement in the areas of, in this case, turns, and didn't need those. So I would get rid of these. I would get rid of these extra commas, and no, I can't get rid of the commas for you. Sorry, that's just part of the formula piece. I had to put either commas or no commas, and it's easier to see something and get rid of it than not see it and then have to put it in. But now, since we did it that way, since I just did Control V, I can't backspace. I'm hitting backspace key and nothing's happening. So we're going to get rid of all that, and we're going to paste it again, but this time we're going to do, I'm going to come up here to the little top thing. We're going to do paste special, and essentially what you want is unformatted text. And a lot of times you can just, do the right click and then choose the unformatted. But in this case, it was having some kind of a heart attack and it wouldn't let me do that. Let me try that again. Maybe it will. No, that's the end of it down there. Yeah, no, see, it's just going to paste it like it's normally there. So no, we don't want that. So now going back up to that same thing, I can backspace. Billy had the opportunity to work on turns. So basically you can crank out an eval in about 10 minutes. And since nobody reads your eval anyway, no matter how much time you put into it, you could just leave it with all the stupid extra commas if you wanted, and just erase things like this, where Billy didn't need anything in the areas of, well, all those are not there. So, would anybody really notice that you didn't have the word and that you didn't have a period at the end? Probably not, because nobody's reading your evals. And then you can bold it if you want to make it look all pretty. So hopefully you either are or have good relations with the TVI, but essentially just copy and paste the front of the kid's functional, where it has a name and date of birth and eye condition and all that kind of stuff. Just paste that right here. And once you get all the way through this, you come down here to the summary. And Billy demonstrated 61.07% of the skills needed to travel independently as an adult, period. So we can just back that up. Billy did well with the skills that made up the domains of concepts and movement. Now, where that's coming from, anything above 80%, it's going to say did well. Billy had room for improvement with the skills that made up the domains of single room, blah, 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 and community. Period. And to make it all pretty, let's do that. We don't need this sentence here because there's nothing there, so we're going to get rid of it. Billy didn't need the skills and the domains of vision-specific O&M skills because Billy is a student who has no vision. I didn't put the period in the right place. There we go. Sorry, I'm a little OCD sometimes. Essentially, you can crank out an eval in 10 minutes. So when you get that call that basically says, hey, we're having Billy's IEP right now. We need a goal and we need the eval. Oh, okay, I'll be there in about 15 minutes. This will take you 10, assuming you can copy the front part, the top part of the eval from your functional vision evaluation. Hopefully you can. Like I said, if you have good relations with your teacher of the visually impaired, hopefully that works out for you. All right, that's not the end of the inventory's beneficence. I just copied these all as at once just to do it, so I didn't have to have this go back and forth more than once. Present levels of performance. Billy did well with the skills that made up the domains of, which, hey, that's just right here. So essentially, this is your PLEP. And if you had just done the eval, you could literally copy, paste, boom, done. Then Billy did well with the concepts of movement. If you don't want to get rid of commas, there we go. And Billy had room for improvement with, I love copy and paste. There we go. There's our concerns. Goal: Billy will demonstrate improved skills and orientation mobility by increasing the score on the O&M inventory from 61.07 to a minimum of 67 by the next annual IEP date. And where it got the 61.07 was it looked at the front and it said, okay, you're at 61.07, and it rounded up the 0.07 to 62 and it added 67. You don't have to take this goal if you don't like it. One, you can make it anything you want. And going backwards, by the way, you could write a whole bunch of narrative stuff here if you want to, or maybe there was something really cool in rural travel that you want to just, go to town on, knock yourself out. Same thing with the goal. If you don't want 67%, maybe you and Billy are going to crush it 77%. Maybe, there's something up with Billy, and you're not going to get to see him very much, or maybe you're focused so much on street crossing and those scores go up slower than others because of liability reasons. Maybe you're only going to get to 65%, whatever. It's whatever works for you. And in fact, I'll show you a goal thing here in just a minute. Please see the attached chart over the previous grading period. Billy increased the score from, and this goes straight from that front page, 55.78 to 61.7, and is now 100% of the way to the goal of 61%. Yay, Billy. Billy made gains in the domains of, and then it just looks on that front page for anything. And let me bring that back. New share and bring that back. There we go. Sure. And so it just looks here on this front page and it says, okay, that was 87.5. Now it's 90. Yep. Add that one. Oh, movement 91, didn't change. It's putting a comma. That's where those commas come from. Single room O&M 71 to 75.8. Yep. Write that one down. And so it does all that for you. And so for progress report, essentially all I have to do is copy, paste, and clean it up a little bit. And again, if you want to do narrative and you want to write about this cool thing you and Billy did, great, do it. If you don't, also great. And on the, and since we're now back here, it starts out, and by the way, you see this kind of goes on and out there forever, and that's fine. You don't need to worry about that at all. The only thing when you're copying on this page is here in the white, and it says only copy stuff in the white, and there really is nothing here. See here, where it says Billy did well with the skills, if you look at the top, there's the formula. That's what's actually in that square, and where it all comes from is down here below the black. This is just where all the formulas live and do all their work and whatnot. Don't worry about that stuff. It's just boring Excel nerdy stuff. So anyway, on progress report, it says, please see the attached chart. Over the previous grading period, it was 55.78 to 61.07, 55.78 to 61.07. And here's where it says he was at 91% of the way to the goal of 61%. And now he's at 100.11% of the way to the goal of 61%. excuse me, when I do the goals and wherever it is, Billy will demonstrate improved orientation and mobility skills by increasing the score a minimum of. Minimum's really important to me because, I tell parents right there in the IEP, if we get your kid past 67%, we are going to keep charging ahead. We are not going to stop. This way we don't have to come back and have another IEP meeting. And on my own IEPs, the buy-in next annual IEP date, I actually have to get rid of the next annual IEP date and put in the date, even though I already have the date 3 different places on the page, whatever. If you need to do, if your admin says, oh, you must do 2 objectives. Okay. Billy will dress for the weather. There's my objective. Or, or Billy will wear a hat with a 3-inch brim to protect against branches, 4 of 5 trials, whatever, and done. I refuse to put thought into paperwork for IEPs. IEP paperwork is, it's just basically a circle. Anyway, I want to know my kid's making progress. The parent wants to know their kid's making progress. Ultimately, the admin wants to know that the parent's happy that their kid's making progress, and presumably that the kid's making progress. And that's all right here on the front page. Because all of these things come from the updates. When I'm updating, I go look at Little Billy's session notes. What did we do this quarter? Did we do anything with theater seating? Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't. If we did, great. Then I'll make whatever changes are appropriate. If we didn't, I'll just keep the same ones from last time. Or, sidewalk skills. Is he correcting for a veer on sidewalk better? Well, let me go back and look at my notes. Did we work on correcting for a veer on sidewalk? Because I don't want to put he corrected for a veer on sidewalk, but my notes don't have anything about it. So, that also makes it easy to find out if a parent says, hey, you didn't teach my kid how to use constant contact. Well, we can show where the kid made improvements. And so if I see that, or better yet, let's say we hadn't been doing diagonal trail, and now, little Billy is, we're rating him at 3 instead of 1s now. Well, now I know that's the quarter I need to go look at, because that's when we worked on diagonal trail, because we hadn't introduced it before then. Now we did work on it. And then after that, if these scores change again, oh, and by the way, if you try to put too big of a number, nope. So if you're just blitzing through and you're just typing, it'll tell you when you double up. So anyway, you can see where little Billy worked on whatever it was. Go to your session notes, find it, and say, no, I'm sorry, your kid got injured doing whatever, but look at the session notes. Here they are. And I have mine on an Excel work document as well, which also is on the NMS BVI website, also a free download, also nerdy Excel stuff. And I can literally just copy that, the kid's notes, paste it, and send it. So anyway, oh, and one other thing, my administration can look at my stuff anytime they want to. It paused. Why did it pause? All right, it says it paused. I don't know why. So I'm hoping it's still going. But anyway, though, so that's how you can use the orientation mobility inventory to do what you need to do with your kids. Basically, do that documentation that you have to do, but then have the documentation do the legwork for you. You don't have to do PLEPs. You don't have to do progress reports. You don't have to do that stuff if you don't want to. Certainly welcome to, but you don't have to. Any questions? You can email me, rlater, L-A-T-E-R, at nmsbvi.k12.nm.us. Yes, it is a nightmare. It'll be on the NMS BVI webpage, where you'll find the inventory for free. You'll also find the birth to 6 inventory. I did not do the skills in the birth to 6 inventory. I did the nerdy part, but the skills were done by our our family infant toddler people, fit people, who actually really know that population very well. And so they did all the skills on that. And then the inventory multiply impaired, and that's been overdue for an overhaul for a very, very long amount of time, but I did this one over Christmas. So anyway, hopefully that will answer questions that you may have. and then we can answer questions as they come up. And again, input, feedback, definitely very welcome. So please do send me your feedback.